Hello, everyone. This is March 7th, Thursday, and our second KUDO community meeting. I'm your host this morning, Fabian Baier. Please join me with a wonderful ride for the next 45 minutes. So let's talk real quick about the agenda. I'll share my screen here, and you see it probably. Tom laughing. There we go. All right.
DJ Fabi coming out here, huh?
There you go. Yep. So, agenda for today. And please let me know if you cannot view that document. We do a quick kickoff. That's what I'm doing right now. A few announcements or one announcement. Then we give you updates on the caps, starting with Jared, then myself and Tom. 2 caps with Tom. And we have open discussions or proposals for new caps. We mentioned last time already a few that were noted there. Maybe there are some more, but that's a discussion. It's really not like talking in detail about it, but really more about like starting a conversation. Then we have a Q&A wrap up, and that's it. So we keep it short for today if there's not much, but you never know. So for the kickoff, one announcement, we do have now our KUDO.dev domain, and thanks Toby for designing the homepage. We use Hugo for that. You can find it if you go on the KUDO.dev, and that's a beautiful homepage right there. Explains what KUDO is, when you should use KUDO. It has a few examples, Kafka and Zookeeper, shows some more features, documentation about the CLI usage, and then of course how you can reach us. That is in the Kubernetes channel, under in the channel called KUDO in the Kubernetes Slack, and then we have our mailing list as well. Additionally, changes from last time, what I did, I created a KUDO calendar, which when you join the mailing list, you should automatically be subscribed. And that will be then also a place where you will find this meeting here. So if you see through my whole calendar here, what you should see and find is essentially this KUDO meeting. And the KUDO calendar, if everything is not lagging and scrolling, come on, scroll down for me. There we go. Is it's called KUDO. It's somewhere here. Let's see, KUDO. There we have it. All right. So, yep, that's about the announcements. Coming back to agenda there. I think let's start and dive right into with updates on our open caps.
Before you leave that, Fabi, could you provide the link for the website underneath that, the GitHub repo?
The GitHub
that
repo
manages that website, so that.
Oh, good call. Yep. So the GitHub repo for that one is in KUDO Builder, and then it's my E is not working. That's why I have to copy paste it. And then we have. Let's just go over there. Wow. According to the cloud, makes my internet so slower. The repo is www. Pull requests are appreciated if you have enhancements there. You find there basically the whole page, and it's also set up with our CLI, Hugo CLI. And there was this pull request that made this homepage happen. Thank you again. All right. I'll make you. Yes.
Just a quick note, as basically we're all like to just reach a broader like set of people, should we maybe tweet about this from like Mesosphere into KUDO account before, like the day before the next community sync?
Oh, you mean about the community meeting? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. On that note, something I noticed was I posted it yesterday in SIG apps and SIG app API machinery. Is that is that something that we want to do continually, or is that something that produces too much noise? Also, maybe something I wanted to talk with you about. Not that we make spam people or something.
I imagine it won't be as appreciated since there's a dedicated channel for KUDO, and people who want to be involved in that can be on the KUDO channel. I think the apps
just
will find it as a lot of noise.
Yeah, so we did it already twice. So I think for the last 2 weeks to kick things off, but I think we kick things off now, and we can like just keep it into our channel.
So I'm happy to tweet on the D2S Twitter account as well, as long as we get a bit ahead of ourselves with knowing when things are happening.
All right. Cool. Alrighty. All right. Let's conclude that, and let's. Jared, are you ready? Can I hand over to you, and you give us a quick update on your cap?
Yeah, sure.
Wonderful.
I'm not even going to share my screen on this one. Solly Ross made a mention of doing so as I mentioned before, the dynamic cap was blocked in us either forking controller runtime or making some upstream changes. There's some movement on those fixes in controller runtime, and we're talking about doing a reference count based watcher so that we can expire watches. So it's been tagged as help wanted. I'll probably jump into controller runtime for a bit and not be working directly on KUDO just until we get that shipped. And then we can continue the movement around dynamic CRDs. That doesn't stop us necessarily from moving on the API a little bit and getting that cap. I'm happy to say that the cap is mergeable, in my opinion. And then we can all start iterating on the proposal together. And get the actual API design together. So technically perspective, I'll be sitting up there in controller runtime probably for a few weeks, and then we'll pull that new DEP in, hopefully around the time that we have a stable proposal for the dynamic CRD implementation.
I imagine that'll be slow going in since they're rolling out 1.14 and getting all that together.
Yeah, so the KK bug probably won't get fixed. So we're just going to work around it with watcher expiration, and then we can probably then deprecate that up in controller runtime once that gets fixed. So we'll assume I think we're assuming for the purposes of that issue, and I'll add that to the agenda notes. For the controller runtime issue, we're just assuming that bug is there and working around it. And then once the API server is fixed for those watches, and for those who don't know, I'll just run through the issue real quick. So dynamic CRDs is all about creating, letting an operator create CRDs, custom resource definitions, on the fly. And this is great for white labeling. It's great for running custom plans. It's letting someone say, instead of instance, you create a instance of zookeeper, kind zookeeper. And that's fantastic, but what we ran into, we discovered a bug in Kubernetes where the internal schema of Kubernetes stores an integer that's a resource version for a group version kind. And for those less experienced with Kubernetes, group version kind is a core of how the Kubernetes resource model works. So the watcher is based on the resource version plus the group version kind. Now, if I were to delete and recreate a CRD, if everything else is the same, the resource version is different. And so watchers break when you have a group version kind with a different resource version. So that's the upstream bug, which leads to us needing to expire watchers down in controller runtime, which leads to us implementing dynamic CRDs in KUDO without running a forking controller runtime. So that's the body of work that Tom, myself, API Machinery has been talking about for a little bit. So, but that won't stop us from iterating on the API. So if everyone here is good, Fabi, Tom, everyone's good, let's merge the proposal where it's at now, because I don't really have any changes to make it, and then let's open up the new PR. We can start iterating on the API design for that while that's in process.
I'll approve in a second.
Any issues with that? Given, because like we're moving towards a process where like we get these PRs in as soon as possible, which is fine. And I still go back and forth between having a fully completed CAP in the context of a single PR and then keeping a CAP as a living document forever, right? And I think that treats a CAP as a living document forever, which I'm okay with too.
You would not mark that CAP as implementable yet, though.
No, it's still provisional.
Great. Okay. As long as that's good.
Yeah. Agree. That's for me also the difference between like those different CAP states they can be in.
Plus, the difference is once it's implementable, you start and create a milestone and issues to it and start actually working on it. And just if you then merge it, it should be implemented.
Yep. Perfect. Okay. Cool. That's all I got on dynamic CAPs. I probably won't give, unless we have API updates, I probably won't give an update next week other than what's going on in controller runtime around that. So let's focus. I'll focus in and I'll start a proposal on the API for dynamic CRDs, but there probably won't be any more technical implementation for the next week on our repo specifically. So that's all I have.
Where are you going to propose those API objects? Specifically,
I'll have a new PR on that CAP.
Okay.
That starts fleshing out a proposal section that we can all start committing to.
Great. Okay. Then next, myself with CLI updates. I'll make it quick as well. So I was working this week on adding more tests to the utils and some clients. One thing that I haven't mentioned in the last meeting is that I created via code generator the KUDO client and a fake client that is also great for unit testing. So you see a lot of commits, daily commits, essentially in the user story is here for installing, but the PR is this one here, and then you see all of the commits. It's right now a draft PR, but I feel confident that I can actually change it to a normal PR. That means Tom and Jared, if you would be so kind then to review it. One item, for instance, that can be then discussed is the kind of like syntax of how a framework should be installed. There's maybe something also worth bringing up real quick and talking here. I do have a little kind of conversation about that in the issue 137, where I talked about the pros and cons and the controversy about just using install that also installs framework version, but also instantiates the instance. So you could make an argument that you say, if you want to install a framework, let's say Kafka, it should just install framework and framework version or whatever it will be then with dynamic CRDs, and not instantiate the instance. But that's up to open discussion. Right now, how I see it, I think we should have this install command, KUDO install Kafka, for instance, that does all three steps at the same time, and then give the cluster operator more fine-grained control by maybe having something like kubectl KUDO framework installed that then just installs the framework, for instance. But open to feedback. So what do you guys think?
I had a few more thoughts on this after we talked about it. And this is predicated upon having the concept of, like, if I do, say, Docker pull nginx, right? Where that's coming from is implicitly is hub.docker.io/library/nginx, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm okay. Like, and what I also to refresh everyone, like, the other part of this conversation was, okay, it's fine maybe having a high level opinionated command as long as we have low level escape hatches, right? So I'm personally, like, I'm okay with that dichotomy as long as we have escape hatches. But the first thing is really more what I think I'm concerned about is, do we want to make the move that KUDO/frameworks is the canonical place for, like I think you need that notion, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think I think if we were just to say like, kubectl kudo install zookeeper, what does that mean? And if we don't want that, does the API then have to change to, a repository model? Does it have to change to having to specify the GVK alongside the, like, do you have to specify the whole GVK in order to get the instance plus framework version? I don't know. I think that's more now. I mean, I know I updated you like 20 minutes, Fabi, but like thinking about it through a little bit more, I think that's more my concern is the repository pattern over high versus low level commands. And so I want to, like, if we're going to have a default install command, we should come up with a solution now that gets the install command in place, but let's not call it stable. Let's make it experimental until we have some sort of pattern of what it means to install something.
Yeah, and the I mean, that could be also like later open cap discussion for like.
Yeah, totally. We can do something provisional now from the source, right? Like let's not stop this cap on the source, but let's also make sure that we don't consider it stable, I guess, like until we solve that cap as well. Yeah.
So, but also don't confuse incubating and stable that we have.
No.
Yeah, exactly. So
there's a flag that like Kubernetes uses, right? And they're experimental flags, right? You have to start the thing up with experimental enable block, right? And I think like from a CLI perspective, we can at least put that in the docs, like, hey, this is experimental, subject to change. Don't shove this in your automation until ready, right? And so that's more what I mean. I don't want to commit to the API of this CLI. I don't want to stop the cap, right? And I don't want to. I want to move to implemented still, and open and have a new cap for sources. But I don't want the implementation of the cap to be implement. Like I don't want people writing Jenkins jobs around it until like we solve the source problem. I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
Right. Yeah. People should be aware that there will be things that might change in the future that can break. So, yeah, well, we should add that as a document, as an action item on the CLI documentation as well. I updated in the PR too. If I forget or something, that's why we have the review. So you should find that there. Okay, cool. But I mean, that's the CLI update. I don't want to take too much time on my 5 minutes. So I want to hand over to Tom for testing.
I don't think there's been any movement on the testing kept this week. The only consideration that I've had over the last week is how we want CI/CD to work with the www repo and whether that's part of what we call our CI/CD pipeline. I know Toby's been making a static branch now that I think he compiles master to and then pushes. I think a very simple redeploy there would be possible on push to that one. Regarding the platform that we're going to hopefully use, it seems like Prow is overkill, so we should look at a little more simplified solution for now. Circle CI seems a common one. I know, Jared, you've been talking to GitHub about the events. I think that's not the right actions. Thank you. I don't know exactly how that works, whether that is actually just events that get handled by a different platform or whether those are actual build operations that can happen inside of GitHub. Like I know GitLab has their own CI/CD in there, but no one uses it, but it's there. So we'll have to.
Actions is kind of both. So I'll make sure you and Fabian are involved. I have it on my private account now, but public repos only support push events right now, whereas private support a whole range like issues, PRs, custom events, whatever you want. So my gut feeling is we're 6+ months away from any motion on that unless we get a serious exception from GitHub and they're interested in the work we're doing. I'll invite the person I've been chatting with about this into our KUDO room and we can get their product managers and they can make the decision. But until then, I don't want to rely on having that as a feature. What's nice, what is nice about that feature is that it's stateless, and it does integrate tightly with GitHub. So we don't have to run any infra. We just effectively have to write functions that get called on events, and those functions happen to fit in Docker containers. So
that'd be great. So the KEP, I think, is implementable at this point. We just need to figure out what our implementation is going to look like. So I will update the KEP with that state and make sure that the names are correct, I think, which is the other comment that Fabi had on the naming of the file for the KEP. And then once that does, I'll ping everyone and they can approve and merge. Any other comments, questions on testing and CI/CD?
What is our, one thing we'll need to figure out, and what we should capture or open a conversation on, is our version matrix.
For Kubernetes Go and KUDO, that matrix?
Maybe that matrix. Maybe I wasn't even thinking that far. I was thinking about, like, the Kubernetes supports current -2 as far as versions go. So when we go to say, like, fix the watchers, right? Do we, when that KK bug in API server gets fixed, do we still have to maintain a custom version of controller runtime until Kubernetes, say 1.18, right? When support for that drops, or no, because that would be, that would be 1.18, 1.17, 1.16. So all I would call for is let's figure out that policy before we implement a testing. Like, let's know what versions of Kubernetes we're going to test, because I'm a little more flexible on Go, because we can just take a version of Go, compile it, and issue the binaries, right? Like, there's no runtime worries there. We can just give people images, but I want to figure out at least what API versions of Kubernetes we're supporting when we go to implement and support a feature.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
I'll open that alongside the testing KEP. We can make it a separate KEP.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right.
The next KEP was the cluster resource objects. There haven't been any comments this week, but I've been brainstorming on my own. And one of the concerns I have are common components across frameworks. So let's say we define a storage system like MinIO for storing backups. And each of those is required for a different framework version of MySQL and a different framework entirely. We store our Flink snapshots there. How do we manage that from a common perspective, and how do we differentiate Flink's MinIO from MySQL's MinIO, or do we? And then once we're on there, what is the security implications of ACLs? If I can pass an argument to restore from an arbitrary file on there, how do I prevent loading Fabi's data with all his PII into my database so that I can see what's going on with his system? So ACLs are something that I'm not exactly sure how to tackle at this point. And I don't know the right place to capture that, those roles and role bindings. But I don't know how people want to think about that, whether that's something to tackle later, or whether that's a blocker on whether this is a feature we would want from a framework, or whether that's a risk acceptance from a framework using this capability.
So so that means, for instance, with MinIO, we would need to host or run a MinIO instance in the cluster dedicated to KUDO that then stores the state, if you will, and the backups, or is that also something that we can maybe outsource and leave to the operator, who then takes care about all those ACLs?
Right. So they could be offloaded to the operator. It's off the cluster. But the idea was that when you install this framework version, I'm going to need a backup place to store the backups for instances of MySQL. Great. Let's have this common MinIO set up so that I don't need to have a separate repository for each instance. And then if I delete that instance, all the backups go away. I can literally have those backups stored in a central repo.
Yep.
Now the operator needs to understand this instance has permissions to read and write from that file on disk, but this other instance does not, because he's not the one who made it. Or maybe he is the one who made it, or they're from the same namespace, or maybe that's the permission. But And then
this
we've
was
got
a
capture.
generalization upon admission hooks, right? So the start of this was let's deploy an admission hook to
Right.
support users who want to adjust an image before it goes out for hardware or whatever reasons,
Mhm.
right? Now, like, and maybe this gets into new caps, but if we were to rewind like 3 months ago, we talked about solving this problem through dependencies,
Yeah.
right? Ish, kinda. We didn't go through the whole, but like you could say, okay, my backup depends on Minio, and we haven't opened a KEP on dependencies yet, but
Right.
we've talked about it. So
in that instance, what you were saying, Jared, is you could define a min.io that's either your own if you're concerned about other people using it, or a common shared one if that's what you want.
or like, because I think we came up with like 4. We should write this as a cap, so maybe during new caps we talk about this. But like, we came up with like 4 situations where you might actually invoke a dependency. One is totally external, right? And I just give it a URL and some data. Another was in Kubernetes cluster, but not managed by KUDO.
Mhm.
2 is existing instance that's managed by KUDO, but independent of my deployment. And 4 is spin this up alongside KUDO, right? And so you get 4 different, like those are the different ways you might want a dependency. And we talked about this specifically with Kafka and Zookeeper, right? Like, how do I get a Zookeeper if I have a Kafka? And thinking about like those access, the reason I'm pushing back to dependencies now that you say all that, is not having any sort of RBAC other proposal in place, shrinking down the number of mechanisms by which someone creates a workload makes sense to me.
Mhm.
And what I don't know is, does that include the original use case of this cap, which was admission webhooks, right? Like are admission webhooks just another dependency, or is it framework wide? Is it bound by the same versioning issues? And to that end, does this cap become a dependency cap and solve one problem of dependencies of the 4+ that we have? I don't know. I just want to, like, that's my only feedback, because I see what you're saying blew me out a lot more than what you've even thought of, what we've even thought of, as soon as other people start coming in and saying, okay, well, we need a centralized whatever, right? And dependency is one of those 4 dependency items that we have, provides for, actually, if you think about it, 3 of those dependencies we have, models we have, provide for a centralized service anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And only one is tied to the instantiation of a framework.
Right.
So that's my only comments. I don't know how to, like, we can figure out a way in that to move forward. And
so I think for these security concerns, the idea is know that as you're developing it from the current KEP proposal, if you have something that is not a security implication, like these mutation webhooks that we're talking about for image substitution, that's something that this KEP would solve as is without issue. So maybe we postpone this idea to dependencies and security, because there's going to be a whole other issue now that we have delete tasks in there about what can be deleted and what can't be deleted.
right.
And we need to isolate those permissions so that instances are only creating objects in the namespace of the instance. These are all namespaced objects, and right now there's nothing stopping a delete task from deleting the Kubernetes service in default.
Right, yeah.
Which would seriously blow up a lot of people's work on the cluster. So there should be permissions on. You can only delete things that were created for this instance. You should only be able to create namespaced objects, and should all go into another KEP for what it means to manage these resources and what's allowed and what's not allowed.
So I would say let's move to the next point, which is exactly what we're talking right now about: open discussions, proposals for new KEPs. So that could be a new KEP, for instance, right? We have a few more things added there. We talked a lot right now about dependencies, but I want to give room also that we can talk about plan arguments, CLI enhancements, meta plans, and semantics for updates, just among those many that we mentioned in our last meeting already. Security is something that, Tom, you just added. Yep, that would be also a wonderful KEP and opportunity for other people to chip in and to collaborate with us. Can you think of more? What's the current state there?
We probably have more that fall out from those things, but because dependency, security.
I think we have a lot of things. I think the issue is that we need to figure out what's important for the next framework that's coming in and who's going to be driving these requirements. So for these ones, these are ideas about improvements that would be good to have. We just don't have that end use case right now that's saying, I need this. So from that end, we're looking for particular frameworks that would need one of these capabilities to actually work in the KUDO environment.
So one thing we talked about last week, and then I didn't get any time to work on it, is what does 0.2.0 look like? From what do we expect a framework developer to be able to do, right? And for one, we'd be insane to go to any sort of production readiness or claim it without sandboxing of workloads inside of KUDO. So I'm happy to that to me is even more important than dynamic CRDs. Like dynamic CRDs is a nice whitelisting, and I think it's a nice win for the API to be more extensible and get more people on board. But if a workload can effectively bring down your entire Kubernetes cluster, that's really bad, right? That to me is a big one. At least automatically creating service accounts that get applied to workloads that are specific to a set of labels. But even like we were talking about dependencies. Even dependencies are kind of a quality of life improvement where you can still do this all with parameters, right? So maybe 0.2 is too early to be thinking about what I'm talking about, but if I don't know, the part of the challenge right now is it's the three of us really driving that prioritization, and it's based on who we're talking to. But is there a model framework that we want to say, okay, you should go and you should use this in production above all other frameworks out there? We own it. We define what's production ready, and then guide our features towards that. Because I don't think we can just rely on external parties to make all these frameworks outside of samples, right? Like we need the Rails blog video of KUDO frameworks and what is that framework, and what do we want to champion as our framework that we supply with KUDO.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to think about it. And my vote would be to take Kafka for multiple reasons. A, we already did some work there. B, it's at least on DCOS, it's the most popular stateful workload. And C, the Kafka operators that are out there are kind of varying quality. So I think it would be a great example to say, hey, there's some operators out there, but here's what they're lacking, and here's the KUDO based one. Here's how it's different.
So we should probably focus on Zookeeper as well, since that's a dependency. And if someone's going to be running Kafka in production, they would want a production-ready Zookeeper nearby.
Yep.
Toby, do you want to open that cap to set Kafka and Zookeeper as the canonical frameworks?
Yep, I can do that.
As part of that cap, we'll define what we want, what we consider production-ready Kafka to be is what I would expect.
Sounds
to be
great.
the output of that cap.
Do you guys have internal members that are quote unquote Kafka and Zookeeper experts that built your frameworks that are?
Yeah, we do have some people that worked on the DCS SDK Kafka framework, so we can pull
Those
some
might be
people
great
in there.
resources. Yeah, and we could get a set of specific questions we want answered for operations and what you did here and diving through the code. I think that would be a great value add.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So for the sake of time, there are 2 more items left on the agenda, which is Q&A and then the wrap up. So let's just see if we have anyone for the Q&A right now in the call. Please speak, ask your question. We want to give you our answers. Going once, going twice, and sold to the man in the middle with the nice hat. Wonderful. Okay, then 4 minutes left. I would say I do a wrap up here. Look out for the next meeting. We have our host, Tom. Tom, kudos to you for hosting next week on the 14th. We will update the Zoom link. We will also update in the channel and post in this agenda document that we have also the recording of the currently meeting. But that was, I think, a very productive second meeting, and I'm looking forward for the third one.
Yeah, and let's just try to tweet about it so maybe we get some more larger community in here for the next meeting.
Exactly. Tweeting
and also be like,
yep.
For us in the recording, can we summarize action items real quick? Like what we want to do post this meeting and track for next week?
Sure. So from like reversing, we have as an action item, for instance, now the cap that Toby wanted to file. We do have, I think, for my part, I think the CLI is where I change it from draft into a review state, and then can hopefully merge it. I think you wanted to merge dynamic CRDs. We want to update people through Twitter. What else? Help me out, guys.
I was going to merge the testing one after I mark it as implementable and make sure
very
comments
good.
are addressed.
And cluster resources / dependencies will drive from Toby's cap.
Yep, exactly.
Sounds good.
Okay, wonderful. Well, then everyone gets 2 minutes back, which is great. Okay, guys, thank you for showing up and good conversation. See you next week.
Thanks for hosting, Fabi.
Wonderful, my pleasure. Anytime. Okay, I'll stop the recording now and see you next week. Bye.